access groups. So the first level on the security hierarchy is going to be your access groups, because that's applied for the entire application, right? So let me access groups, it's going to be for the entire application. So this decides whether a user can access into the application or not. If yes, what kind of access group he is part of? I mean, is he an admin so that he can have access to all the studios? Is he a manager so he can just look at the case worker portal? Or is he an end user where he can just log in into the end user portal? So that is decided on the access group, which we are already familiar of. Good. Now within the access group, we have something called as roles. Okay. So within the access group, what we have is roles. Let me give you a simple scenario. Suppose I have 3 types of managers in my organization. Okay. For example, senior manager, manager, and assistant manager. So 3 managers are there. Now you expect me to create 3 different access groups for them. One for senior manager, one for manager, one for assistant manager. 3 access groups are required.
No, we can have one as manager and we can give the access group.
Right. So instead of creating 3 access groups, right? I mean, because in each department I have to create 3. One for finance department, one for technical department, one for admin, one for HR. Likewise, imagine how many access groups I will end up with, right? So instead, what we do is we will create only one access group, but we can define roles for each of the 3 different managers. Right? So roles are something where you define what is the functionality that they are performing. So roles are entirely dependent upon the functionality that a person does on the application. Okay. So when in an access group, I can list n number of roles. Right? So if you observe, let me go to the access group. So let me open this so-called admin operator access group. So within the access group, if we see, first thing that we look at is the application, which application it is pointing to and which version it is pointing to. So the next thing we see is portals. What all portals that access group can have access to? What is the default portal? And the next thing we see is the roles. Open the access group. Right, so here comes your access roles. So by default, few access roles are created along with the application, right? So you can see them. I mean, they might be empty because we haven't added any thing into it. But let's have a look at some existing roles. So roles are, you can say, the second level of security because they are specific to the functionality. So the role that you perform on the application. Access role is going to be depending upon the job functionality, right? So access group starts with restricting on the application level. Access roles define restrictions on the job functionality, right? So now let's see what do you have on the role. I'm going to open some role instances. Right, so on the access role, what you see is, right? So here I see some classes are there and I see some permissions. Read instances, write, delete instances, read rules, write rules, delete rules, execute reports, execute activities. So let me open some class randomly, data-admin-operator ID. Okay. So yes, here I see restriction on each individual class. Okay. So so-called class data-admin-operator ID is available. Now, can a user read instances of this particular class? Can he write new instances to it? Can he delete any instances? Right? Can he read rules on this particular class? Can he write rules? Can he delete rules? So likewise, for each operation, I can restrict the access. Okay. So here I see access is defined in the range of 0 to 5. 0 means you're restricting all the access. Okay. And anything between 1 and 5 will provide access. And when to give what is depending upon the environment. So 1 is basically your experiment environment, 2 for development, 3 for testing, 4 for pre-prod, 5 for prod. So that's how Pega identifies the environments. Okay. So anything between 1 and 5 will provide access, but 0 will restrict access. Okay. Now, if you want a conditional access, okay, probably depending upon some condition you would like to provide access, then you can give the when conditions. So these are not your regular when conditions. Instead, they are your access when conditions. Okay, and the whole of this restriction on individual class level is called your AROs. So what are those? They are called AROs, which is access roles to objects. So that's the next level of restriction that we can bring in. Access roles to objects, which is restriction on what? On the class level. For individual class, I'm able to restrict the access. It could be for read, it could be for write, it could be for delete. Okay. So access roles to objects will provide the access only and only if you specify it. Right? It could be probably like static. I mean, it could be 1 to 5, or it could be a dynamic one where you can give the conditions. Okay? And these conditions, they are not your regular when conditions, instead they are access when conditions. Okay, so these are specific to the access related things, the security related things. So they are access when conditions. They are not regular when conditions. Okay, I think let's have a look at the AROs. So for in each of the role, you have got some AROs available. So these are all your AROs with respect to the role. Instead, you can also see them in the ARO instances. Yes, here is your AROs, and you can see it is respect to a particular class. Let me open this data-admin- system. Right, so this is your ARO. This is your control with respect to the opening instances, then modifying rules. Yes, so these are the access controls, and these are the levels that I've mentioned. So 0 means restrict access or do not provide access. As 1 is an experimental environment, 2 for dev, 3 for test, 4 for pre-prod, and 5 for prod. Okay, so this is compared against the environment, and accordingly the system will decide whether you can access this or not. Okay, and this is always specific to the access role. So here is your role, and this is your AR. Okay, so this is the restriction on the class level. Now on the same level, I have one more entity which is called access deny. So access deny is going to be the exact opposite for your access roles to objects. So here you are restricting access, whereas here you will allow access. So access deny, here are my access deny instances. Okay, so for access deny, if you observe, 0 means do not deny access, nothing but allow access, right? 0 allows access here, whereas for ARO, 0 does not allow access. So they are the exact opposite. Okay. Now, which one to use is depending upon how many, or you can say, if you want all the rules, all the instances to be restricted, okay, until unless you explicitly provide access, you can go for AROs. So considering the maximum, if you want all of them to be allowed, only 1 or 2 to be denied, then you can go for ARO. Okay, if it's the reverse, you can go for access deny rules, depending upon the majority. Right? But the thing is, your access deny and your AROs are the exact opposite. Okay? So if you observe access deny, so by default, Pega denies access to all the instances of a class unless you explicitly grant access to the users. So when you start using the access deny rules, I think, yeah, this is what I was mentioning. The access deny is similar to ARO, but the logic is reverse. Okay, so ARO denies the action until unless you specify it, whereas access deny, it allows the action unless specified. Depending upon the majority of whether you want to allow it or whether you want to block it, you can choose the access deny or AROs accordingly. Okay, but both still are on the same level. So they are on the class level. Now, if I still dig further, any guesses what is the next level that I'm going to restrict access on? I started with application, it went to roles, then individual classes. After that, any guesses?
On
Which
individual rules.
Perfect. So the next is going to be the individual rule level. For that, we have something called as privileges. Okay, so privileges are applied for individual rules. So I can restrict